Welcome back to the Quilty Life with Jenn George Burt. Today I've got something really fun planned and I think all of you watching are really going to like it. So this video is made for two different people in mind. One, maybe you're a person who is improv curious and you're really interested in trying improv, but you're kind of intimidated by it because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing while you're doing improv. If that sounds like you, stay tuned. The second person this video is for are people who are already into improv, but they're just kind of curious about how other people do improv. I always find myself thinking, well, I do it this way, but does everyone do it this way? Am I weird? Is there some other way that I could be doing this that was more efficient or maybe just more interesting? If you've got that kind of curiosity, this video is for you as well. So what are we doing today? Well, in episode 20, we are going to do something similar as what we did in episode 19, where we generate a random prompt and I'm going to just run with it and make something on the fly and walk you through the entire process. I will talk out loud as I'm making decisions. I'll tell you why I'm doing certain things, all the way from beginning to end of the process. So if you're hearing the word prompt for the first time and you want to learn some more about that, make sure you go back to episode 19. I talk about this in depth and I explain what prompts are and how they can be helpful and all that good stuff. I'll make sure I link to that in the description so you can jump over to it really easily. So let's stop jabbering about this and really just get to generating a prompt. So just like last time, I am going to use my prompt generation book to make myself a randomized prompt. And as before, all prompts start on page 7. And we begin by rolling a 6-sided die. And we got a 4. So this is a standard size prompt. And I am going to record this in my prompt logbook. And this is my second prompt that I have made using this copy of the book. So this is a standard sized prompt. And now it says that I need to go to page 11. So I will do that. Here on page 11, I need to roll the die. And I got another 4. So my block size is large. And I got to decide what tiny, small, medium, large, and extra large are in my opinion. So in my opinion, a large block is 8 by 8. So I'm going to write that in my prompt. And now I need to go to page 13. Page 13 tells me that I need to roll again. And I got a 5. 5 tells me that my mystery fabric is the answer to question number 10. So over here, here's question number 10, and my answer was neon bright. I am going to write that in my prompt logbook. And it tells me I need to go to page 15. So on page 15, I need to roll again. And I got a 6, which, as you know, in this book, that is always a lucky roll. So I can pick whatever I want over here. And I think I'm going to go with only black and white. So color scheme, only black and white. And now I need to go to page 17. And page 17 tells me I need to roll again. And I got a 4. So 4 tells me that I need to make a choice for description number 4. So in number 4, I have that the classic block to use as an inspiration will be one of these 3. In this one, I was able to write 3 different answers for each part. So now I can pick one of these 3. And I think I am going to pick 9 patch. So I'll write that in my prompt logbook. And now that is the end of the prompt. So our final prompt is to make an 8 by 8 block where we have a mystery fabric that is neon or bright, and the overall color scheme is only black and white, and the block should be inspired by a 9 patch. I'm really excited by this one, so let me go pull out the fabrics that we need to get started. Okay, so here we go. Luckily for you guys, I use a lot of black and white, so I got a lot of black and white scraps that we can use here to work with. And then I was also thinking about the neon bright requirement. We've got to have that mystery fabric mixed in with our black and white. And I just happen to be currently working on a quilt that uses this really bright, shiny neon fabric. So I think that definitely qualifies, and it helps me use up some leftover bits from a project that I'm currently working on. Okay, so a 9 patch is, if you don't know, it's 3 squares this way and 3 squares that way. So it makes a square that is 9 squares. That's the typical way to do a 9 patch. Now, of course, a 9 patch doesn't have to have equal size squares. They don't even necessarily need to be squares. They could be rectangles, and the individual little pieces within a 9 patch don't have to be just simply squares. They could be made up of other things. So I'm first going to dig over here into my bin and pull out some fabrics that maybe I want to work with. So I have a mix here of solids and prints, and I have a bunch of these tiny little squares that are black and white, which are pretty cool. So I think I might try to use those. And I've got some sort of solid black pieces here, so I'll pull those aside. That's always helpful to have. And here's a fun stripe of black and white. Ooh, and that's really fun. And here's some black and white squares already cut. And here's some more black and white stripe fabric. And then I've just found these bits that are left over from a project that I worked on, and some solid white. So this seems like a very reasonable pile to start working with. It's definitely way more than we need, but it gives us lots of stuff to look at and pull from. So let's sort of separate this out so we can get an idea. My immediate reaction is to look at this piece right here and sort of slice into it and use that as a starting point. So let's do that. Let's move this out of the way. We don't really need it. And that gives us more room to spread out a little bit. Okay, so let's cut us off a chunk of this. Now, what can we sew to it? My immediate reaction is this, because they're close to the same size, and I think that might look pretty cool. So I'm just going to sew these two together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then see where we can go from there. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, what if we put the other stripe here on this side, because I can tell that this is approximately the right length and that'll fit. So let's try that. But what if the stripes go the other direction? Well, that might even be more fun. So let's cut this chunk off first and then cut a chunk going in this direction. Okay, I really like that because then all the stripes aren't going the same way. That seems pretty fun. So I'll lock that in. All right, that looks pretty cool. Let's try trimming off the top and bottom and see what we have. Okay, I really like this, but it's obviously a little bit on the boring side. So let's try something else. Let's try to mix something else in here. How about if we cut right here and just insert something in here? How about if we just go with a piece of black? And we just need to find a piece of black that's big enough. And there we go. That's a pretty long strip there. So we'll just cut off a chunk, and I'm just going to insert this in here. All right, that looks pretty cool. So now maybe we're going to do something else on this side, but let's try using some of these little squares that we have here. Maybe we can actually use these to make a little 9 patch. Let's use the dots like this, and then use these like this. That's looking pretty cool. Let's make sure that we don't see something. Oh, I really like this right here. Let's actually change that out to that. Okay, I like that. So this is actually its own little mini 9 patch here. So I'm going to sew those together and lock it in, and then we'll decide how we're going to use it. And there we go. It's so cute. I love it. So let's figure out a way to insert it in here. Maybe it's going to be the top right hand like this somehow. So let's slice some of this off so we have somewhere to put it in here, and then figure out where we're going to go from there. Okay, so I've cut this off, and we're going to put this somehow here. What if we just slide that down that direction a little bit and then put in something else over here? Maybe solid black again, just to keep things tame. So this should be somewhere around the right size, so I'll go with that. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to trim this off even, and I'll sew it onto that. And that's looking pretty groovy, I think. So let's sew this onto that. Okay, so I've got this and I like it. And I'm just sort of looking at it and thinking it still seems kind of boring to me. And also I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, well this is around 8 inches this way, but it is only about 6 inches the other way. So we need to grow it that way somehow. And I'm feeling like we need some more of the bright yellow in here. So I'm going to grab this chunk and think about how we could incorporate this somehow. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I'm going to cut sort of an angle over here and insert maybe just a tiny sliver of the yellow. Maybe I don't need all of it. The other thing that I could maybe do is just cut a skinnier chunk of this. Oh, I have an idea. How about if I cut like this and like this, and then I turn this around like that and make a little baby 4 patch? That might be pretty cool. So then maybe I'm going to trim it down and make them into long slivers, but let's sew these together first and see how that goes. Okay, yeah, that's cool. So, but I'm going to sliver this down a little bit because I think I want these little pieces to be a lot skinnier. All right, so let's think about how we could put this in here somehow. So what if we put this on this side like this somehow, or maybe it goes farther down. So what if we just do, again, another chunk of black? Okay, let's try that. So let's sew this onto this and then see where we go from there. Okay, so I've sewn that on, and let's trim down the sides. I am actually going to use a ruler in this case since it's pretty long. Now let's think about where we could put this. Maybe if I just sliver off some of this and then I can sew that on there. That might look pretty cool because I like how this black is sort of going into this. It's forming some cool stuff here. So let's try that. I will just cut off right here. And I'm actually deciding to cut here because this is a seam allowance. And if I cut here, I'll cut that off and I won't have any weird extra bulk to deal with. And now I can just sew that on just like that. Okay, I like the way this is going. And let's check the size now. It's pretty close to 8 this direction. And we're still about 1 inch short on this side. So let's think about, do we want to add something up here or do we want to add something up here? So I'm thinking like, well, maybe it needs some more neon. And that might look cool because then it sort of comes up like that. And we could even do a smaller chunk of it if we wanted to. And then all of the neon is sort of in a diagonal. And I like that idea. So let's go with that. Okay, and maybe it needs to be slightly smaller. I like that, but maybe it needs to be farther down here. That still makes it in the diagonal, but maybe not all the way up here on the edge. And I kind of like keeping dark around here, so this sort of stands out as its own little thing here. So maybe I add another chunk of black onto that. So let's start with that. I'll sew this onto this, and then we'll see where we're going to go from there. Okay, I like that. And then maybe it just needs to be more black over here, or maybe we could put in some black and white like that. That might be interesting. We also have the reverse with black and white like that. And you know what? I think I like this one better. So let's cut a chunk of this off and then sew this onto that, and then we can decide what to do after that, as always. Okay, and I like this, so let's straighten up this side and that side and then sew them together. And there we are. I am actually really happy with where this is so far. Let's clean some of this up. I'm going to move some of these pieces here now that we have gotten to a point that is feeling pretty good to us and we are in the right size range. So I'm going to come in here now and sort of clean up the edges. I'm not worried about really making it square. I'm just going to get things a little straighter. And there we go. If we were worried about it being closer to 8 by 8, we could trim some of this off on this side quite easily, and it would look very nice. Now, why does this meet the requirements of our prompt, which was 8 by 8, and that's approximately right. Mostly black and white is their color scheme with a mystery color of a neon or a bright, so we've obviously done that. And the 9 patch, honestly, we've gone a little loosey-goosey with our interpretation of 9 patch here. Clearly, there's a 9 patch right here, and if you want to think about it, this is sort of a 9 patch, and maybe you can say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could say this is a 9 patch, but I'm going to be honest, that's a bit of a stretch. But everything I did as I was working was inspired by a 9 patch. The idea of a 9 patch, of working in a 3 by 3 grid in various ways. So while the final black, probably no one's going to look at that and say, oh, a 9 patch. The process was 9 patch inspired. So as you saw as I was working, I only make one decision at a time. I just keep deciding. And sometimes I go in a completely different direction than I thought I was going to go in to start with. And that's part of the fun of working this way. And now just think if you went and did this again, using the exact same prompt, you might come up with something totally different. In fact, it's likely that you're going to come up with something totally different. And if another person had exactly the same prompt, they have a different stash of black and white fabrics. They have different ideas, different ways that they are going to interpret that prompt. So theirs will look very different. But since they're all black and white and neon, inspired by 9 patch and of a similar size, you could then take a lot of these and put them together to make a really cool, cohesive looking quilt. So I hope you've enjoyed watching me work through this random prompt that we created and listen to me talk out loud about the decisions that I made along the way. And I hope you like the block because I think that turned out pretty cool looking, if I do say so myself. So I'll see you again here next time for another episode of The Quilty Life with me, Jenn George Burt.